Appreciate you guys all coming. Just want to start out kind of thanking our scouts, our coaches, medical staff, really everybody that's kind of involved in this pre-draft process. It's a long, year that comes together with these 3 days. It's really important for our organization, and so just thank those guys for all their work and all their effort.
When the trade happened?
Trade's not finalized yet. We were expecting it to be done very quickly, hopefully soon. A lot of things have been agreed upon, but there's some things to go through.
How much did how talks maybe accelerated the last 24, 48 hours, and things pick up this week or?
Not really. I would say the last 5, 6, 7 days we've been talking. We've been talking much longer than that, but I think the last 5 or 6 days over the weekend and stuff that there's been a lot of conversation that helped us get to this point. But again, there's still things that need to be done. It's not finalized, but we do expect it to be done here in the next couple days.
Is it just paperwork at this point?
Mostly, yeah. But those are significant, so we're not there yet. But again, we're expected to have this done before the draft.
Ryan, how important was it to get this done before Friday?
It was very important for us. I think, wouldn't have been the end of the world, but at the same time, I think it would have certainly changed things quite a bit. So getting it done ahead of time was important.
Why?
I just think certainly the capital for this year, was very important, certainly more valuable than future stuff. So for our football team, so there was a number of reasons, but that's why.
And I believe at the owners' meetings, we talked about that 13th pick, and you said it's not like a must-have. Mm-hmm. How did that swap become involved in it, and was that something that maybe
I'll at some point, because I know I'm going to be talking a lot over the next 5 or 6 days, I could go into some of those, but nothing's really been finalized yet. So until it does, if you guys just bear with me, I'll go through that stuff with you at a later date. But right now we're still ironing some things out. But I appreciate the question.
How important was it for you to limit some of the conditions on the pick that the Jets will include for next year as much as possible?
Yeah, I'm going to echo that again. Before I get into any of those kind of things, we're gonna pause there, and we'll pick it up in these other times. I got to talk again, right? Okay, yeah. So
turning to the draft, Brian, what do you specifically about certain positions in this year's draft that you think can help this team?
Yeah, I think it's a good draft overall. I'm much of the belief that every time you pick, there's a player that can help your football team. I think I might have mentioned, but I think it's a good edge class this year. I think there's a lot of deeper class of edge players than there have been in other years. But I think tight ends is another one. I think I mentioned earlier as well. So, but I think it's a good draft overall. I think it's certainly one that we're excited about. One that we really believe we're going to be able to add to our football team and help us for 2023 and beyond.
I understand not being able to get into specifics before it's finalized, but generally, how are you feeling right now? And I imagine there's probably multiple feelings through your mind.
Yeah, we're going through it, right? So it's part of the job, and I think whenever you've worked on something as long as we have here, you're just hopeful that it can get done and everything can get squared away, and then I'm sure there'll be feelings after that. This drafting is so consuming in some ways that it's obviously my favorite part of this, but it's very consuming. So it's just I think right now it's just get through and continue to accomplish the tasks that we need to accomplish.
Would you say that you're pleased with how this appears to be turning out?
We'll see. Like I said again, we'll talk more, I'm sure, about it as we go through the weekend. But I think hopefully there's some finality for everybody in it.
Ryan, you said in Phoenix that talks have been pretty consistent between the two parties. Did some of those things maybe get tabled in the month of April as you guys are both kind of preparing for your own individual draft stuff? And I guess just overall, how amicable have things been with Joe that you guys have been able to have these conversations, table them for a while, and just pick them back up? Yeah,
Joe's always great. He's he's a scout by trade, as am I, and so yeah, no. These aren't easy, but he's excellent to deal with.
What's it been like to balance, obviously, an all-consuming thing like the draft with this other thing that's pretty big too?
Again, it's part of what we do, and we're always prepared for these things, and so it's just kind of part of the process, and we lean heavily on our beliefs and process, and but there's so much volume of work that needs to be done, for the draft process. It's that's helpful.
Assuming this thing does get done before Thursday, just how advantageous is it for draft preparation just to have this out of the way, be able to just kind of focus? on the draft entirely?
Yeah, I think once we do get it squared away, that'll be a nice feeling because we'll kind of actually know exactly what we have for this particular draft, going into it at least until we start moving around a little bit. But yeah, I think, again, moving forward with compensation in this year's draft was important to us.
Brian, and does it help Jordan as well, and just help the team in general to have this kind of behind you, so to speak?
I think eventually, yeah. Right now we're in the very beginning of the offseason program. I think that's probably, I don't know if our guys spend too much time on that. I don't think it's something they think about as much as maybe everybody else does.
How much do you prioritize quarterback in this year's draft? And all these other positions we talked about, but 2008, you guys drafted Braun in the second round.
Right.
How important is it to add a quarterback?
Yeah, I'd like to say it's really no different. I mean, it's always important to us. That position is something that we spend as much time on as any every single year because we just understand how important that position is to a football team. So this year it's very important, but really no more important than it has been in the past.
Brian, since we talked to you in Phoenix, have you talked to Aaron at all, or was this strictly done just through the agents?
Yeah, I have not talked to Aaron. I have talked to Dave, done quite a bit, but I have not talked to Aaron.
Hey, Goody, you said you wanted to do what was right for Aaron and right for the team. Why is trading him the right thing for your team? Forget about him. Why is it the right thing for you guys?
Yeah, I think where our team is at. Obviously, Aaron's up there in age and has I don't know however many years he has. I think he's got some really good football left in him. But I think for us, it was just as we got through the offseason and started talking about where we wanted to go. This made a little bit of sense for us. We wanted to get his input, like I've told you guys in the past, and would have loved to have that and kind of see where he sat with that. That didn't happen. That was a little bit unfortunate and disappointing for me. But at the same time, I just think, as we move forward, we're really excited where Jordan can go. He needs to play. And having him sit another year, I think, would have really delayed kind of, where we're going and what we're trying to build.
You talked about not getting the input from Aaron that you wanted. If y'all have had a conversation, do you think this could have ended differently? Or?
Yeah, that's hypothetical. Who knows? Like I said. Would have liked to have it, didn't have it happen, so it kind of is what it is.
Obviously, conditions aren't part of every trade, but when you look at when you're negotiating based on conditions, how important is it to you to have those be based on participation as opposed to be based on performance?
Yeah, I'm going to echo. We'll talk about those, I'll be happy to talk guys through some of that stuff as we get forward. But until this thing is finished, I don't really want to get into the details of that stuff. But I appreciate the question.
Goody, David's made a couple of comments lately about you guys rebuilding. You look at your depth chart at wide receiver. There's nobody there that was here a year ago before the draft. You're thin at tight end. I know you don't like to use those kind of words, but how do you kind of view what this team is and is becoming through this process right now? Is it fair to say you're rebuilding?
No, I don't ever look at it like that. We're excited about this football team and where it can go. Obviously, we're a long ways away from what our 53-man roster and our 16-man practice squad is going to look like. But we're really excited about it. It's going to be new, obviously, specifically a quarterback, it looks like. But at the same time, the goals don't change around here. It's going to be the same goals we've always had, right? There's one goal here every single year, no matter what. And just like it was back in the last time we moved on from one quarterback to the other, right? The goals are the same. And it's going to be on those guys to put in the work, and it's going to be exciting to see. But, yeah, nothing's really changing.
You're excited about Christian and Romeo especially. When you look back at 08, you had Driver here, you had Jennings going into his third year, you had James Jones going into his second year. At least Aaron had some experience and an experienced tight end. Is Jordan in a little bit of a challenging spot in terms of how youthful you're going to be at those positions if you can't find significant veteran options? And even if you do, they're not guys that have been in the system.
We'll see. I think there's going to be challenges. There's no doubt about it. There's always challenges in any NFL season. What those will be is kind of to be determined, right? Whether that happens to be, there's an experience around them, or maybe that, maybe letting those guys play a little bit more in their second year, maybe that's a really good thing. We'll see. So to kind of try to predict what challenges that this team's going to go through is kind of it's tough to say, but there will be challenges.
Kind of along those lines, how important is it, especially with this extra pick that you got, to really load up around Jordan to give him the best possible chance to succeed?
Yeah, well, I think we've got to remember that we're trying to win games, and that takes all three phases. So we're going to load up as much as we can in all three phases. Certainly as we go forward, offensive skill, will be part of that, just like everything else. But I'm not really looking at it kind of in that window. I'm kind of looking at it the whole team.
What did you see last year at the safety position that you feel that maybe you could improve on, maybe through this draft or what's left of free agency? What are your needs there?
Yeah, I think obviously we picked up a couple guys, and we're going to be interested to see those guys compete. We brought some guys back that I think the more opportunity they get, we're excited about their opportunities. But that's certainly an area where, right now with Adrian Amos not being here, and he was such a kind of a pillar back there for us, there's a little bit of a void there. But there's some guys that are eager to try to fill that void. And certainly as we go through the draft and the rest of free agency after the draft and through training camp, that's certainly an area we'll be looking at.
So you're focused on the entire roster, but this is the first draft that you've gone into knowing that you're going to be changing the quarterback. How do you balance that?
Yeah, we had some of those off seasons. I wasn't sure, so to be honest with you. So, but yeah, no, I think, it takes, I think you're always looking at your football team to try to give it, the best opportunity to win in that particular year. And just like Matt does, and the coaching staff does such a great job with, you're going to tailor things to kind of what you can do and what your players do well. So it's no different than in personnel. As we build this thing out, we're kind of looking at what we have, what we need, and then the best way to attack teams. So
In the past, you've said it's not a challenge to have an off season when you're in doubt about whether your quarterback is coming back or not. Now, as you look in rear view of the last several seasons, what's that been like from your perspective, and in what ways is it easier when you don't have that moving forward?
Yeah, I think that, again, there's, like I was kind of talking about our team and the challenges. You never really know what's around the corner and what challenges you're going to face. You got to kind of be prepared for it all and react accordingly. I think you're always trying to build the most robust all-around football team that you can. I mean, from Ron Wolf to Ted, we always talked about when you're talking about a football player or a team that you got to be able to win many ways in this league, because if you can't, people will take that away. So it's kind of the same thing. I think as we go through it, we're always trying to build the most balanced football team that we can.
Are you a believer, Brian, in drafting for need or drafting a best position or best player available?
Yeah, I think you'd love to say every single pick is just best player available, because you truly don't know what your needs are going to be when you come to the season. At the same time, it's hard not to let those subconsciously or consciously kind of enter your mind what your roster looks at right at the moment as you're looking at these players, how you stack your board. I've always kind of felt as we stack our board through the last 4 months that because we really do evaluate for our football team, not the league, that subconsciously, if we have a need, it's going to factor in how we stack that board. So, again, I think if we can, best practice is best player available, just because I think by the time we get to September, October, November, what our needs are could be anything.
Brian, let's scout by trade. How fun is it for you to see your staff kind of hit their stride over these last couple of months leading into this week?
Yeah, no, I mean, being in that draft room with that entire staff is again, as most of you guys know, is probably my most favorite time, being with those guys, kind of talking about players, talking about how we can make this team better. Seeing our young guys, some of our young guys that do such a wonderful job, but kind of come into their own into that room. Yeah, I mean, I love that part of it. Always will. It's so important to our organization. It's the lifeblood of what we, this whole thing. And no, I think we have such a good group. They work very, very well together. They're led by some really good guys, and we're very fortunate.
Today's NFL is tight end a more premier position than it was maybe 10, 15 years ago?
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, there's so many demands on the tight end, right? I mean, certainly they have to know the entire passing trees and all the things we're doing from that standpoint, but then also in the run blocking and pass blocking. So it's a very demanding position. Obviously, as you guys have seen how Matt uses multiple tight ends, it's very important to our offense. So I think sometimes that can be a little scheme related, but for us, it's very, very important.
When you put your board together, do you assign different values to different positions?
I think we look at that a little bit, yeah, certainly, but it doesn't affect how we build our board. I mean, every individual player, regardless of their position, we try to value, and but yeah, I think as we go through it a little bit, we do value certain positions over others, but at the end of the day, you really don't know what your needs are going to be, like I was talking before. So just because a guy doesn't maybe fit one of your higher positional values, if he's a good football player and good all-around football player, to me it's important that you don't overlook that.
You mentioned how important these 3 days are. I'm sure you go back and look at each year how you perform in hindsight. You've done a lot of these drafts now. When you look at the third round in particular, is it just a coincidence that some of those players haven't panned out, or is there something that you can look at that you did and try to approach differently?
Yeah, certainly we look at all that stuff. I think a lot of, when I look back at some of the, a little bit of it's been opportunity for those potential players. I also think I've always thought the third and fourth round is where your board gets the thinnest, so we've kind of looked at that a number of different ways and analytically, and hopefully moving forward here we'll have a little bit of luck.
2008,
Most of your guys, you've had most of your guys back in the building the past week. What is their attitude, their mood, and like what feels like an inevitable change here?
Like I mentioned it a little before, I think these guys don't pay a lot of attention to that stuff. They're going to get asked about you guys a lot, but I think they're in here working. To be honest with you, I haven't, besides in the dining hall, we're all breaking for lunch, so I haven't seen a whole lot of them because we've been kind of tucked away in the draft room, most of these days. Hopefully, as we get moving forward here past the draft, I'll have a chance to connect with some of them. But, these guys are, kind of focused on themselves right now, getting themselves ready for a long season. So I think this stuff affects them much less than the outside world would like to think.
And I'm sure Aaron will come back here one day and get the send-off maybe he deserves or you would have liked him to get. Yeah. How do you feel just about how this all went down? I mean, you just traded away maybe the best player this franchise has ever seen without talking to him for the last month. Is it weird, and how do you kind of balance those things?
Yeah, I have so much respect for Aaron and not only the person but the player that he is, and there's so much gratitude in what he's done for this organization. Again, it would have been nice to have those conversations, but at the same time, over the last few years, I kind of understood that may not happen. So it's different, and like I said, that would probably hit me a little bit at some other juncture when I don't have a lot on my plate. But I know this, he'll always be a Packer. You know what I mean? And he'll want to be one of the best that ever have done it around here, and I have a lot of respect how he went about it. And he'll be missed. I mean, there's no doubt about it. I mean, players like that don't come around very often. But at the same time, we're really excited where we're headed and what we're moving to do, and wish him nothing but the best. Again, this has got to get finalized before all this is done. But just a lot of appreciation for him.
Brian, 2008, a month after Ted traded Brett, he went and got two of them. You feel you got to get a quarterback this weekend somewhere?
Well, right now we only have two on the roster, so whether it's this weekend or somewhere down the road, we're going to have to. I think. I'd like to have three at least, before we get to any of the throwing stuff. We're not there yet, but certainly we're gonna add to that room. Whether we end up with three and go into camp with three, whether we have four, we'll kind of see. But there's some guys in this draft we're very high on, and if they happen to be at the right spots, then as I won't hesitate. But we'll kind of see how that shakes out.
You've been knocking on the door of Super Bowls for years. Part of that, the byproduct of that, is paying a lot for premier players over that time when the cap gets tight. With that in mind, how much more pressure is there on the draft when you can acquire younger, cheaper talent to get those right?
No, that's a great point, and I think it is. I mean, it's always really important, right? Getting really significant contributions out of your young players is very important in this league. Certainly over the past 3-4 years, where we've kind of done some things that we normally haven't done to kind of really chase something, has put us in a spot where right now the draft picks that are heading up last year and this year, very important for us.
Back to the scouts from a few minutes ago. How have you what has that been like from your chair, watching them kind of come together the last 5 years with some of the guys that have been here for a long time, along with some of the younger guys that you guys have developed with you?
Yeah, I think the thing that when I came in here a long time ago, and Ron was running things, but we had guys like, Scott McLuhan and, John Schneider was here for a little bit when he came back, Dorse, Reggie McKenzie. There were so many of these guys that, Sean Hirock, that as a young scout coming in, that you really learn more through them than I did from, maybe directly from Ron. And that was really important. It was all the lessons that they had learned from, Ron or other people passing down. And it's a process that we believe in, the way we go about kind of taking scouts in from the beginning and training them, and kind of seeing those guys go through that and see all the lessons that maybe I learned 20-some years ago being passed down to them, not directly from me, but from these other guys. I think that it's something, continuing a lot of that, the process that was started so long ago, continuing that, tweaking it, getting better. is really important, and it's really neat to see.
From a first-round value standpoint, how significant is it to move up 2 picks in the middle of the first round, should you happen to do that?
Yeah, should I happen to do that? Yeah. Yeah, I mean, obviously, if you look at the trade charts, it'll tell you how much that's worth and things like that. Really, I have no idea until I know who's on the clock when we're picking, right? So we'll see. If I were to do that, I wouldn't be doing it. I'd be doing it because I thought it was important.
I think we all underestimated, though, that for something that's as important as this, for turning the page, and if it gets finalized by Thursday, that in a business of values.
It's got to be done by tomorrow. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah.
Okay.
To go into that first round with this chapter ending, lets you focus in on if the phone rings Thursday night, offers. It really clears the slate for both teams as you get into this weekend to build your rosters, right?
Yeah, I believe so. I mean, I think we've been working on this for a while, and to get beyond the draft, I think would have been tough for both teams. And so that I think, again, the time Joe and I spent working on this, and it was a lot, but can't thank him enough, for kind of how we went through it. But again, it's not done, and I'm trained by Ted Thompson until the final, T's are crossed and I's are dotted. It's, nothing's official yet. So,
Brian, you've told us throughout the offseason that you thought Jordan was ready. Mm-hmm. Why? Why do you think he's ready for this?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, obviously we've seen steady growth through his first 3 years here. I've talked about the challenges that he faced with no preseason early and going through some things. But last year I thought through practice or a number of times because of Aaron's injuries where he had to kind of take over the ones during practice and some of the competitive areas, and I just think you start him to grow and grow and grow. And again, he didn't get nearly as many opportunities as we would have liked last season during games, but when he did, he certainly answered the bell. And I think it's just natural maturation as a person too. Just again, you guys know what is put on a quarterback in the National Football League's plate, a starting quarterback, is significant. And there's a lot to that, not only on the field. And they're going to go through a lot of challenges. But I think we started to see him grow into that role and felt more confident.
Well, at the time last year, late in the year, would you have preferred that he played in that stretch in December, maybe?
We were chasing the playoffs. And so absolutely not. Again, I think if we would have been out of the playoffs, it would have been a conversation to have, but it's also, I think, with the respect of what Aaron's done around here and how he's carried himself, that would have been a group discussion and see how he wanted to play that a little bit. But at the same time, again, up until that final game, we were still in this thing, and I think that wouldn't have been right for our football team or our players to try to do something like that while we were still in it.
Just saying to Mike that it would have been tough if it had gotten past the draft. Mm-hmm. I know you said you were traveling 180 days a year during the 2008 summer, but was it important from an organization standpoint, from Jordan's opportunity to succeed standpoint, to make sure that we didn't have a repeat of that and the drama that could have followed if this deal didn't get done before now?
Yeah, probably, but I wouldn't have expected that to happen. Even if we would have got past the draft, I wouldn't have expected that. So.
Is that just from learning from 2008, or why would you not expect that to happen?
I just don't think that would have been good for anybody, and I just don't think that the parties involved would have, I just don't think that's how it would have unfolded. I don't know that, I wouldn't have expected it.
I know you're not afraid to make the tough decisions, but looking at the last 2 off seasons, you've traded a wide receiver that you yourself said you think is a Pro Football Hall of Famer, and now you traded Rodgers. When you took this job in 2018, would you have pictured having to do those 2 things? And is there an element of risk involved trading 2 great players in back-to-back off seasons?
Well, that's the first part of it. Yeah, that's part of the job, right? So absolutely. that's part of this job. Is obviously Aaron was going to enter a time in his career where, he was going to be ending, and we had to be prepared for the future and get prepared to try to move forward, right? So. So yeah, that's part of the National Football League, So great players are going to come, they're going to go, and you got to be prepared to continue to add good football, players to your roster so that your team can win. So I hope that answers your question. But yeah, this is National Football League. So
is this risky?
There's a risk in the National Football League, but we were 8-9 last year. So we're trying to get better. You know what I mean? So I think that's important.
You talked about the way that the improvement you saw from Jordan last year in every respect. What's the response you've got from, the reaction you've got from these last 6 weeks in discussions with him, once it's become apparent he's going to be the guy?
With Jordan?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think he's excited. You know, he popped in, I don't know, a month ago or so for a few days, and then obviously he's been back since maybe a week, 4 or 5 days before the offseason program started. So, you know, I think I think he's eager for his opportunity. But he's been good. You know, I know I haven't spent a ton of time with him other than, you know, here and there, just because of the draft prep and everything we're going through. But yeah, I think he's in a good place.
Joe Douglas expressed optimism that this deal would get done or will get done. He's expressed that since the start. Has there ever been a moment you doubted it would get done?
Oh, I had a few, yeah, no doubt. I mean, you know, it was a long process, but you have to be prepared for everything. So I think, you know, I felt it would be done all along, but at the same time, as long as it took, I think there were certainly times where you're kind of like, well, maybe it won't, and then how are we going to proceed going forward? And but yeah, there were moments.
When you're on the clock, Brian, I mean, there's probably no hard and fast answer to this question, but let's say that there's a need that you got to fill, and when you're on the board, there's a whole bunch of guys that you like at that spot. Do you take a guy there, or do you think, you know what, there's going to be someone who I'm still going to like at ground later? I mean, how does that thought process go?
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of that. You know, I think you're always looking at your board and trying to understand where it's strong, where it's weak. I think you work really hard to try to have an understanding of where players may be available, where they may not be available. You know, there's been times, I think, in past drafts, going way back, where, you know, it's, if we don't take this position right here, we won't have an opportunity to take this position, you know, and I think you got to be careful there. You can make mistakes that way. But it's very rare where you got a bunch of players sitting there that are equal. You know what I mean? And it's just, but you know, I'd rather have volume. I'd rather have more picks. So moving back's always an option. You know.
2 more, please. Brian, we were in this room in December, and there's certain things that get said from that podium that are pretty memorable. And you said, and I want to make sure I get this right. As I've been taught from the time I walked into this building, whatever comes with having great quarterbacks, it's worth it.
Mm-hmm.
You remember saying that?
Mm-hmm.
Matt pointed out you haven't talked to the guy.
Yeah.
He says some things that obviously are frustrating. Were there times when you started to question whether it was worth it with him?
No, I think, again, you know, there's always issues with players that you go through. And I think we have a great organization that works really hard to try to give these guys the best opportunities to succeed. But no, I think, you know, again, we're chasing Super Bowls, right? And that's an important thing, and that's what this is about. It's not always going to be easy. It's not going to always, you know, go smoothly. You know, we were 8-9 last year, and as we move forward, it was more about what we're going to do to get better and you know, have a chance to win this thing. So. You know, as you're going through some of those things you're talking about, and you're 13-3 or 13-4 and #1 seed, you know, again, you know, that whole locker room, coaching staff, scouting staff, this whole organization, like, we're trying to win a Super Bowl, right? So you'll put up with a lot to try to chase that, and we'll continue to. But yeah, it's never really easy. There's always difficult things.
By your own admission, you changed some things with your communication after 2020. You made a trade for a player that you wouldn't have not for Rodgers, saying that you wanted him on the team. Does this allow you to in any way relinquish or get back some control that might have been lost over the past couple of years?
I wouldn't say that, because I don't really look at it as control. I think obviously we did some things for a player who felt he needed that to succeed, right? And that won't really change. But I do think that there's lessons learned throughout that will probably apply differently, and especially, like, I think as Matt and I continue, we're always looking back and saying, how can we get better? How can we do things differently? Are there trickle-down effects from how we do things? And we'll certainly continue to do that. I hope that answers your question.